You know, the drag about this Panasonic GH5 is that I love the way the image looks after I shoot everything. Like, it's kind of hard to use this camera, though, to be honest with you. Like, the screen, to me, this screen right here, it sucks. I mean, once I get outdoors, I can't really see it. It's just so much worse than the Panasonic S5, at least in my opinion. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong with it. I've tried everything. I've gone into all the settings. I have the settings in this camera memorized at this point because I'm like, there must be something that can make it easier to use this camera. It's micro four thirds, which I don't mind. And there's something about the image that I love. I'm using a 17 millimeter lens right now, which is 35 millimeter equivalent. This lens cost me like 80 bucks. It's brand new. It's built like a little tank. It's a little metal lens. It's really, really well built. I can't believe it's so cheap. You know, the manual focus ring on it is so easy to use. It's so convenient. It's like a really easy lens to use if you're manually focusing. And I have a Mikey 35 millimeter as well. And, you know, the other disadvantage with this camera is if I do want to do some slow motion, I can only do 4K 60 8-bit. I mean, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but it kind of bothers me, you know. But there's a lot of advantages too. I can go open gate on this camera. I can't do that on the S5. This has a full-size HDMI if I wanted to add an external monitor. But I don't like adding external monitors. So anyway, I just wanted to say I'm shooting this with a GH5. I think I already shot the video this morning on this camera, so I mentioned that at the end of the video, but I wanted to put it at the beginning of the video here and just tell you I'm trying to run this camera through its paces because I'm thinking very seriously of selling it. Because I think I'm going to get a second S5 because I'm shooting a movie right now. I'm going to shoot most of it anamorphic. I have two full-frame anamorphic lenses, both APS-C, but I can't use them on this camera. And if it's like I would rather have two S5s and be able to have two angles set up. It'll make things a lot easier for me than having to shoot the same scenes over and over and over again because I'm like a solo filmmaker and I do the same scenes over and over again to get different angles. And it would be easier for me, obviously, to have two cameras. I mean, yeah, two cameras running at the same time, and I could use my two anamorphic lenses together because I can't do that with the GH5. So I think I might sell it. I might sell the two lenses and get a second S5. I could probably do that, and it would wind up costing me like 150, 200 bucks total. I might even be able to make an even trade. But there's something about this camera that I love in terms of the image. And for me, the image is everything, you know? I mean, I guess I'm learning that usability does matter, you know? Like the ergonomics, it feels great. I actually like this body better than I like the S5's body. The way it feels in my hands, it's kind of more of a rounder kind of body. The S5 is very square. I also think that this camera is a little bit more sturdy, although both of them are pretty much beasts. Like, I've been really hard on the S5 and nothing's ever happened to it. I did break the eyepiece, but, you know, just the rubber around the top of it. So anyway, there's just something about this camera that I love. Every time I shoot with it, you know, I'm frustrated with it, but then I get home and I'm like, damn, it looks good. So there's just something about it that makes me not want to let it go. But I might let it go because I think that would be better for my film. And that's what really matters more than anything. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, this is a video about me and the poetry world and how that could really help your filmmaking and any kind of storytelling. So anyway, using the GH5, I'm using the TT Artisan 17mm f1.4 lens. Both of those, I highly recommend them if you're going to shoot micro four thirds. But yeah, if you have full frame, and most of your lenses are on that full frame camera, yeah, I can't even get a speed booster to use those anamorphic lenses on this camera. Plus, then my 35mm would be a 7, well, it would actually be a 40 equivalent because of the 1.33 squeeze factor. But still, I would have to get a 24mm APS-C anamorphic lens for micro four thirds. Speed booster does not allow me to use L mount. So anyway, on with the video. I'm going to shut up now. All right, first of all, it is way colder out here than I thought it was. So I don't know how long I'm gonna last, but it's a beautiful day. There's not a lot of clouds, so I probably won't have to mess with the light going up and down. And I had something on my mind today, so I figured I'd make a quick video before I went out and worked on my film, which I'm doing today for my Patreon people. And I just touched the mic and that probably made a terrible sound. Let me just check something here. Sorry if that made some horrible sounds. Did you know that I spent a lot of my creative life in the poetry world? And it was totally by surprise. Like I was never a poet before in my life. Just a little background. I went through a horrible time personally in my life around 2007. My whole life fell apart. All kinds of horrible stuff happened. I'm not going to get into any of it really, but just suffice to say, my personal life, I dealt with a lot of death. I dealt with the end of a marriage. I dealt with tremendous amount of loss, financial loss, like crazy stuff. Like everything happened all at the same time. And it was really, really challenging for me. And I had to move. I had to leave New York City. I wound up in a place called Asbury Park, New Jersey. And I moved there intentionally because I didn't know anybody there. And I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't know anyone. I just wanted to be totally isolated. But it was kind of a mystical place that I was interested in. It was a place that had been kind of left. Like there were race riots there in the 60s and the whole town got burned down. And then the state of New Jersey just kind of left it there for years. Like nobody paid taxes there. I mean, just to give you an example, I went down there one day and I was putting money in the meter, a parking meter, and a cop drove by and he got out and he was laughing. I was like, what's so funny? He's like, man, ain't nobody put money in that meter since like 1970. So they left that town, but it had all these beautiful old buildings, like right on the beach, on the boardwalk. It was a great kind of destination for people to vacation in the 40s and the 50s, and it's kind of like Coney Island. And as a matter of fact, there's an iconic face called Tilly down there that is the same face that you'll see in Coney Island. Like a kind of like the face of Coney Island, the face of Asbury Park is the same. So anyway, beautiful theaters down there, a beautiful old carousel building, which I used to break into all the time to rehearse. So anyway, I moved down there and I was all by myself, and I was still in the music business at the time, but I kind of decided that I wanted to leave music and get into the theater because that's something that I always kind of wanted to do. I saw Whoopi Goldberg do a one-woman show, many years before that, and I always felt like that's where I belong, like that's what I should be doing. So anyway, I just started writing. And I found myself writing poetry, which was so bizarre because I had never even read a poem, let alone written one. Like literally, I had nothing to do with poetry in my life. And but I was writing. And I started to watch these videos of these like poets from the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. I was very interested in some HBO show, Def Poetry Jam, and I got really interested in it. It was like a very rhythmic, it wasn't hip hop or rap, but it was just a very kind of intellectual but urban kind of feeling to it, and very visceral. And it was resonating with me deeply, so I started writing kind of in that style. And, you know, one thing led to another, and somebody who I met down in Asbury took me to a poetry club. She heard some of the stuff that I was writing, and she was like, yo, that's poetry. Like, you need to go to a club. And I was like, poetry? You know, but I was just writing and writing and writing all day, every day. Hundreds and hundreds of these pieces of what I thought was theater. So I went to a club, and, you know, I'll never forget, you know, the first time I went to this place called Loser Slam in Long Branch, New Jersey. And it was the first time I had ever gotten up in front of people to read this stuff, but I had it memorized. I didn't read it. I didn't want to read from the page. And, you know, I remember I finished, and the response was crazy. I remember there was this one girl sitting in front of me, and the minute I started to speak, she started screaming, like, whoa, 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 like, and I didn't know if that was good or bad. Turned out it was good. And so the next place I went, somebody said to me, you need to go to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, which I had never heard of it, even though the Nuyorican Poets Cafe is kind of like the Yankee Stadium of poetry. I mean, it's this legendary, iconic place. And so I went there, and you had to like get in line and put your name on a list. And if you were one of the first 15 or 20 people, you got to get up on stage. And it was a Wednesday night, and the first night I got there, the club was packed, absolutely packed. And I performed a piece that was from what I was intending to be a play. And I'll never forget, you know, like, I was so scared, my knees were wet, like my legs were dripping with sweat. Like, I wasn't nervous. I mean, I had been on stage my whole adult life in music, but for some reason I was terrified, because I guess I had never done anything like this before. And I spoke. I didn't read. I never read from the page. Totally memorized. And when I finished, it was total silence. 300 people in this club. Total silence. You could hear a pin drop, and I was like, fuck. That was terrible. And then all of a sudden, the club exploded. And the response was just off the charts, like incredible. And I remember being up on that stage thinking to myself, like, wow, this is why I was born. Like, I just knew that I was in the right place, like I had arrived. I was doing what I was meant to do. You know, what I knew organically in my body, that I was home. And so I began going to poetry clubs. And, you know, I still didn't think I was doing poetry. And, you know, honestly, I never considered myself a poet. But I started winning slams, you know, and I was developing a gigantic following, and my mailing list was getting bigger and bigger. And then these people followed me to my theater work, and it became really valuable for me. And it was really an incredibly, you know, an incredible growing experience for me, a time of evolution in my life, you know, just not only as an artist, but as a person. And I met all kinds of different people, you know, like really interesting people from all over the world. The poetry world is a really interesting world. And I find it very unique in the arts, you know, because generally nobody's doing it for money or fame or trying to be famous, because you could be like the national slam champion and nobody knows who you are, you know, and you're not making any real money. You can make some money doing colleges and stuff like that, but it's not like trying to get a record deal or trying to win an Academy Award, or, you know, it's like poetry. Like, I'm thinking most people watching this video could not name one poet who was like the national slam champion or something like that. You know, like, you don't know who these people are. But they're incredibly intelligent, creative, amazing people, and artists, great artists. So that was kind of like, that laid the foundation for my theater work. And, you know, it's funny, one time I did a show, I performed my play, Broke Wide Open, at a theater in Trenton, New Jersey. And Trenton is kind of like a rough town, you know what I mean? Like, it's a city riddled with violence and gang activity and stuff like that, or it was at that time. And this guy who I had performed at his club in Trenton one time, somebody brought me down there, and I performed in his club. I featured as a poet in his club. And so he came to see my play, except that he didn't know it was a play, and he had never been to the theater before. And so, you know, I'm doing the show at this place. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was at a place called the Mill Playhouse in Trenton, New Jersey, the Passage Theater. It was a pretty big regional theater, you know, like a legitimate regional theater, like Steppenwolf, The Signature, Mark Taper, places like that. And anyway, I'm on stage, and this guy walks in late. And, you know, people don't generally walk into the theater late. And if they do, they're very quiet. But this guy walked like right up to the front of the stage, and he's like, "Yo, Rock, what's up? What's up? What's right?" And I'm like, "Yo," you know, I'm like trying to be subtle because, you know, there's a theater audience there. And I'm like, "Yo, it's a play. Go sit down." So, "What's up? What's up, man?" So finally he gets in, he sits down, and I continue the play. And there's an intermission and Broke Wide Open. So I noticed that for the second act, he wasn't there. So the next day I get this beautiful note from him on Facebook, you know, and he loved the show and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, "Yo, why'd you leave? You didn't see the second half of the show." He's like, "What are you talking about? I saw the first set, you know. I figured the second set was the same thing." Because he didn't know what theater was, you know. And years later, this guy wound up writing a play. And so I think that's one of the things I was most proud of with my work as a poet, is that I brought a lot of people who had never experienced theater before into the theater, and they started writing plays. They started to get involved in something that they had never been involved with before in their lives. And that's an incredible honor for me. The cool thing about poetry too was a lot of the places that I performed at were not like the Nuyorican. They weren't like these big, you know, iconic places. They were like these little out of the way, like abandoned storefronts, art galleries, bookstores, places in the South Bronx and parts of Brooklyn, like places in the hood, you know, where people were, you know, performing pieces that you felt like if they didn't do this, they were either going to die or kill somebody. Like, it was like real serious art. You know what I mean? Like real expression. People needed to get it out of their bodies. They needed to share it. And it was just incredibly, like, I don't know. I just felt like it was a gift for me to be around these people, to experience this with other artists and other human beings who were using art in the highest possible way. You know, like really sharing stuff that was all about community, because people would be talking about like real shit. And then you'd sit around in these clubs. It kind of made me think like this must be what it was like in the 60s during the Beat Poet time, where people would sit around and talk about important political things that were happening, social ills, things like that. And that's what it was like. So, you know, I've just met some incredible people who I'm still in contact with today. Real activists, like real serious people, you know, not people trying to be celebrities, not people trying to, you know, like be known, not people trying to have the most likes and the most followers. And I find that to be one of the most important parts of my journey. And I have to say that it's not like that anymore. Now people are trying to get likes, trying to get known, trying to have big social media followings. And it's kind of lost a lot of its foundation of what it really was. It's lost a little bit of its soul. And I kind of lament that. But, you know, I just wanted to say that if you're on any kind of creative journey, I think it's creative journey. I'm sorry, it's so cold, my mouth is like frozen. But if you're on any kind of creative journey, or if you're going through some kind of a difficult time in your life, I highly recommend writing about it and finding open mics in out of the way places that you would never go to generally. You know, just places where, you know, you've never been, around people who you've never been around, and share your work. And, you know, as much as you might not think that anybody's going to be interested in your stories, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. I remember one night in particular, I shared a poem about Sean Bell, this guy who had gotten shot by New York City police officers, but it was really a piece about white privilege. How what happened to Sean Bell could never possibly happen to me simply because I'm white. Like, he was shot 50 times by New York City police officers and he was unarmed. And so they just had this visceral fear. They saw this young black man coming out of a bachelor party at a club in Queens, New York, and they shot him 50 times and killed him. And it just, like, that could never happen to me. Like, they would never have the same response. As a matter of fact, I could be somebody like the guy who shot up the church down in Georgia, where the police picked him up and then took him to McDonald's on the way to the police station. Young white guy who had just murdered a bunch of people, innocent people. So white privilege is a real thing. And so anyway, I read this poem, and this guy came running up to me afterwards, this big guy, you know, African-American guy, running at me, and I'm thinking, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but he literally comes at me, gets right in me, puts his arms on my shoulders and says, yo, thank you. I have never heard anybody who looks like you acknowledge your privilege, acknowledge that that could never happen to you. Thank you. And I was like blown away. And I'm still friends with this guy to this day. And as a matter of fact, I based the character in my play, Brooklyn Quartet, after him. The character's name is Saint, and his name is Saint. And I have had so many experiences like that in these poetry clubs. And this was at a place called Soul Sweet Sanctuary. And it was run by this beautiful woman, you know, who was like, she was like kind of like the den mother of this community. It was like right in the heart of the projects in the South Bronx. And it was just a very spiritual place to come to all the time. I was honored to actually do a full performance of Broke Wide Open when I was still developing it in that space before I opened it like 3 years after that off Broadway. I learned so much in these spaces, and like I said, I met people who influenced me greatly and who taught me so much, and hopefully I made some kind of contribution to them as well. That would be for them to say. But I know I got so much out of it. So anyway, I'm going to link a poem that I wrote pretty recently, and I made a video that is literally outtakes from shots that never made it to my film, This Is the End for Me. And my composer, Steve Peckman, is, I think, still mad at me for not really doing anything with this poem, because it was originally in the film and he scored it beautifully, and he thinks it's some of the best work he's ever done, and now it's doing nothing. And I don't want to release it as anything because it's just outtakes. Like, the video doesn't make any sense to the poetry. But I'm very proud of the poem, and I'm very proud of his music, and I love the way it looks. I mean, it looks pretty cool just by luck, you know? So I'm going to link it at the end of this video, and I'll also put a link in the description so you can check it out. And also, I don't know if anybody knows, but I have a merchandise page, like a sales page on my website, and I have a PDF version of a poetry book that I wrote that is, you know, like, again, to me, it's not poetry, really. It's just me writing, you know, about a lot of my experiences, and there's some really deep stuff in there, but there is some cool poetry, I think. And I attribute that to everything that I learned from the other poets that I was around during that time. And so if you want, you could buy a version of my PDF of my poetry book. And the cover was made by a guy named Anthony Andujar, who's a genius artist that I came across during this you know, period of my journey as well. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I come from the poetry world too. And I hope you'll check out the PDF, and please subscribe to this channel, and please hit the like button if you like what I do here, and please consider becoming a part of my Patreon. That's, like, I say it all the time, but it's my lifeblood. It's really important to me. I have supporters there that are just, you know, people that I think about every single day. And I actually say their names every day, and they don't know that, but I look at that list and I say the names of every one of my Patreon members every single day, and you see them scrolling here on the screen. And so if you want to be a part of that, if you want to support somebody like me, I think the greatest honor I've ever received, and, you know, I've won a lot of awards for my craft. You know, I've won acting awards and playwriting awards and filmmaking awards and music awards. I've won a lot of stuff. But I think the best thing I ever got was an email from a woman who said to me, this was somebody who donated to one of my fundraisers called 500 Names. And I was raising money to produce a play. And she said to me, I just wanted to let you know that I told my daughter this morning that Rock Wilk will never make a project that we are not in support of, because he is an artist who I think should exist in the world. That I am grateful that he exists during the time that I am alive with my family. And I don't think there's anything you could say to me that is more meaningful than that, that honors me more and that makes me more dedicated and committed to the work that I do. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate you all so much. For those who care, I'm using the Panasonic GH5 today because I'm really interested in Micro Four Thirds. I don't know what it is. I think there's something about the image that has maybe a little bit more grain, or I don't know what it is, but I kind of like it. And so I've been using the GH5 more lately. I'm shooting with the TT Artisan 17mm lens, which is a 35mm equivalent, and using my Purple Panda lavalier mic. I'm using my Zoom H1N, and that's for those filmmakers who care about that kind of stuff. And you're probably not still here anyway, because who watches the whole video? Very few people, and if you do, I love you for that, and I'll see you in a minute. Bye.